Derek stayed on the mat, gasping for breath, his pride shattered. Around him, the students no longer looked at their sensei. Their eyes were fixed on the janitor who stood calm, composed, and strangely regal under the harsh gym lights. One of the younger students finally spoke, voice trembling. Who are you?" James closed his eyes for a moment. He had spent 20 years running from that question, 20 years burying the truth beneath mop buckets and quiet hallways. But now there was no hiding. Slowly, he opened his eyes, his voice carrying the weight of memory. "Once," he said, "they called me Ironheart." A murmur spread through the room. Recognition flickered in a few faces. The stories of the underground legend, the fighter who had terrified champions and then vanished after one tragic night. James stepped off the mat, picking up his mop again. His shoulders sagged, not from defeat, but from the burden of memory. But that life is over. Respect isn't earned by breaking someone, it's earned by knowing when not to. And with that, the janitor returned to his work, leaving silence heavy in his wake. Derek lunged again, pride pushing him forward. He launched a sharp kick toward James's ribs, expecting at least a flinch. Instead, James moved with sudden, startling precision. His hand shot out. Not hard, not brutal, just enough. 2 fingers pressed against Derek's ankle mid-kick, shifting its path by inches. The force that Derek had unleashed betrayed him, sending him off balance. He toppled onto the mat with a heavy thud. The students gasped, eyes wide. One whispered, That was impossible." James stepped back, giving Derek room to rise. His calm gaze held no triumph, only quiet warning. "I told you," he said softly. "You don't want this." Derek scrambled up, face flushed with embarrassment more than pain. Rage burned in him now, hotter than reason. "You think you can make a fool of me?" James shook his head, the weight of his past pressing hard on his chest. This wasn't what he wanted. He had sworn never to fight again, but every move, every taunt was pulling him closer to revealing the fighter he had once been. James Ironheart Washington, the man who had terrified champions. The gym grew silent as James stepped onto the mat. Even the hum of the fluorescent lights seemed distant now. The 8 students formed a loose semicircle, some watching eagerly, others shrinking back with unease. Derek puffed out his chest, feeding on the attention. "Everyone, gather round. You're about to see why there's a hierarchy in martial arts." His words dripped with contempt. "Some people belong on the mat. Others, well, you know where they belong." James's jaw tightened. Those words weren't new. He had heard them before. Jeers from the crowd in Las Vegas, sneers from sponsors, and comments whispered behind his back. Back then, anger had driven him. And that anger had cost his best friend, Tony Hammer Rodriguez, his life. One spar too aggressive, one punch too hard, one fall too wrong. The accident still haunted his dreams. Now, 2 decades later, he stood barefoot on another mat, facing a man whose arrogance reminded him of every voice that once doubted him. Only this time, James wasn't the young champion chasing glory. He was a man with nothing left to prove. The gym smelled faintly of sweat and disinfectant, its fluorescent lights glaring down on polished mats. Derek Mitchell, tall and smug in his black belt, scanned the room with the pride of a man who believed he owned it. 8 students lingered after class, stretching, talking in low tones. Then Derek's eyes caught the figure at the far corner, a janitor, mop in hand, quietly scrubbing the floor. "Hey, you there? Cleaning?" Derek's voice boomed across the mat. "How about a quick demonstration? Bet you've never seen a real fight in your life." The students chuckled nervously. Some shifted uncomfortably, but no one dared intervene. James Washington looked up slowly, his dark eyes calm. At 42, he had learned to move without drawing attention, to blend into the background. "I don't want to bother you, Sensei," he said softly, dipping the mop into the bucket. "Just finishing up." Derek laughed theatrically, a sound meant to humiliate. The students joined in, though unease lingered. None of them knew the truth, that beneath the quiet janitor's skin lay a storm the world had once feared. Eric straightened, his breath coming faster than he wanted to admit. A faint tremor ran through his hand as he reset his stance. He told himself it was just surprise, not fear. But the truth pressed harder with every failed strike. This janitor wasn't ordinary. James tilted his head slightly, his voice quiet but steady. "You don't understand what you're asking for." The words unsettled the students more than the movements had. Derek forced a laugh, though it sounded brittle. "Don't act like you're some kind of master. You're a janitor. You scrub floors. That's all you are." The insult echoed, but no one laughed this time. Instead, a heavy silence settled in. The students' eyes lingered on James, not with mockery, but with a growing curiosity. James exhaled slowly. He remembered Vegas. He remembered the lights, the roar of the crowd, the thrill of combat, and the night it all ended with Tony's lifeless body on the mat. He had buried that part of himself for 2 decades, but now, Derek's arrogance was dragging it back into the open, and James knew the mask wouldn't hold much longer. The students leaned forward, caught between awe and fear. Their teacher had fallen once, and the janitor hadn't even looked winded. Derek's pride roared louder than his reason. "Again!" he shouted, charging with a barrage of punches. Each strike cracked through the air, desperate, furious, but James's body flowed like shadow and wind. He slipped past every blow, his feet whispering across the mat, his eyes steady as stone. "Stop," James said firmly. But Derek didn't. The last punch came wild, sloppy with anger. James caught it, not with force, but with control. His hand closed gently around Derek's wrist, halting him mid-swing. The room froze. With a subtle twist, James turned Derek's momentum against him. In the blink of an eye, the sensei was flat on his back, pinned by nothing more than the janitor's calm precision. Gasps rippled through the students. One covered their mouth. Another whispered, He's not just anyone." James released him at once, stepping back. His chest rose with slow, steady breaths. The mask had slipped too far now. His past was no longer hidden. It was standing in the open, undeniable. Derek shook off the unease gnawing at him. He couldn't afford to look weak in front of his students. "Fine," he snapped, sliding into a stance. "If you won't make the first move, I will." With a burst of speed, he lunged, throwing a sharp jab toward James's chest. The students gasped, but James didn't flinch. He simply shifted his weight, his body gliding out of range as though Derek's fist had passed through smoke. The punch landed on nothing but air. Derek stumbled a step forward, his confidence flickering. James didn't counter. He only watched, calm, unreadable. "Try again," James said softly. Irritation flared in Derek's chest. He struck again, this time a sweeping kick aimed low. James lifted his foot in a measured step, avoiding the strike without effort. No wasted motion, no strain, just quiet precision. The students exchanged bewildered glances. This wasn't luck, this was mastery. Who are you?" one whispered under their breath. Derek's jaw clenched as sweat began to bead on his forehead. For the first time, the sensei was no longer teaching. He was being tested. Derek circled James like a predator toying with prey. His students watched with uneasy anticipation, their eyes darting between teacher and janitor. "What's the matter?" Derek sneered. "Afraid? Or are you just going to stand there like a lamppost with your mop?" Laughter rippled through the room, but it sounded hollow, strained. James stood motionless, eyes half closed, breathing calm and steady. The years of hiding had sharpened his discipline, teaching him to bury his fury deep beneath the surface. He wasn't here to impress anyone, but Derek's arrogance was awakening something he had long silenced. Then Derek made his first mistake. He pushed James lightly on the shoulder, a careless gesture meant to humiliate. But when his hand met James's body, it was like pressing against stone. The janitor didn't budge, not even an inch. The smile faltered on Derek's face. "Interesting," James murmured, almost to himself. His tone wasn't threatening, but the calm weight of it shifted the atmosphere. For the first time, Derek sensed what his students already felt, that he might have picked a fight he could not win. Derek strutted across the mat, arrogance dripping from every step. "Come on, man," he said, flashing a grin that usually silenced beginners. "Just a little demo. I bet you don't even know a basic guard. Show my students the difference between someone who trains and someone who just cleans." James set the mop aside and straightened slowly. His movements carried a strange grace, nothing like the clumsy shuffle Derek expected. For the first time, the students' laughter faded. Something in the air shifted. Their eyes locked. In that brief moment, Derek felt something unsettling, an aura that made his instincts scream to back away. He quickly covered it with bravado. "Nothing serious," he said, his voice a shade tighter than before, "just to show them why respect matters." James's chest tightened, the dormant muscle of his past life stirring. 20 years ago, he had sworn never to fight again. 20 years of hiding, of carrying the guilt of one terrible night. Yet now, faced with humiliation, the storm inside him threatened to break free. The gym was no longer a place of casual training. It had become a stage. Every student could feel it. Something bigger than a spar was unfolding. Derek circled, his smile stretched thin. He had expected quick dominance, a lesson for the janitor to remember. Instead, it was he who was being studied, toyed with. James hadn't thrown a single strike. He hadn't needed to. Each failed punch, each mistimed kick had exposed Derek's flaws. And James, without malice, had shown them all. "Why won't you fight back?" Derek spat, his chest rising and falling with sharper breaths. James's gaze was steady, because fighting isn't always strength. Sometimes, restraint is. The words stung more than a blow. Derek lunged again, but James brushed his fist aside with the lightest of touches. The sensei stumbled, nearly losing balance. Gasps filled the gym. For the students, the balance of power had shifted. Their teacher was no longer the one they looked to. Their eyes followed James now, the quiet man who moved like a master and carried the weight of something they couldn't yet name.